Jake Morrison stood by the window of his office looking out at the stars beyond the station. The diplomatic outpost orbited Nova Geneva, a neutral world where humans and aliens met to discuss important matters. Jake had been working here for 5 years now, and most days were filled with boring meetings and endless paperwork. Today felt different. The message had arrived an hour ago. It came through channels that nobody used anymore. Old communication systems from centuries past. The encryption was ancient, the kind that Lisa Chen, their chief historian, had to dig through old archives to decode. When she finally broke through, there was only one word on the screen and a set of coordinates pointing to empty space at the edge of known territory. The word was in Calarian, a language that few beings still spoke. It said, "Remember." Jake turned from the window as Lisa entered his office. She looked tired, her eyes red from staring at screens for too long. She carried a data pad and her hand shook slightly. "I found it," she said, sitting down without being asked. "Jake, I found what they want us to remember." Ambassador Krell, the vaccine diplomat, entered behind her. The reptilian alien moved slowly, his scales darker than usual. That meant he was upset or worried. Jake had learned to read vaccine emotions over the years. "This concerns the Council," Krell said, his voice raspy. "You should not act alone on this." Lisa ignored him and activated her datapad. A hologram appeared above Jake's desk, showing old records from Earth's archives. The dates made Jake's chest tighten. These files were 847 years old. During the First Contact War, Lisa began, humanity fought against the Dreth Empire. We were new to space, and we were losing badly. The Dreth wanted to wipe us out completely. They attacked Earth's colony worlds, and millions of humans tried to escape. Jake knew this history. Every human child learned about the First Contact War in school. It was the darkest time in human history, when extinction seemed certain. Most species ignored our calls for help, Lisa continued. They were afraid of the Dreth, but one species answered. The Calarians opened their worlds to us. They took in 300,000 human refugees. They gave us food, shelter, and medical care. They also shared military intelligence that helped Earth's fleet survive. The hologram showed images of Calarian cities from long ago. They were beautiful, with towers that seemed to grow like trees and lights that glowed soft and warm. The images showed human families walking among Calarian citizens, human children playing in Calarian parks. The Dreth found out, Lisa said quietly. They punished the Calarians for helping us. They destroyed 12 Calarian colonies. They killed billions. The Calarian civilization never recovered. Jake felt cold. He had never heard this part of the story before. In school, they taught about how humanity won the war, how they built a fleet and pushed back the Dreth. Nobody talked about the species that helped them, the ones who paid a terrible price. Before the refugees left Calarian space and returned to Earth, Lisa said, their leader, a Calarian elder named Mirath, made our people promise something. The promise was recorded and sealed in Earth's deepest archives. Mirath said, "We do not ask for payment. We ask only this. When our twilight comes, when our people face their darkest hour, remember us. Remember what we did. Remember that we stood beside you when no one else would." The hologram showed an old human man, his face weathered but his eyes clear, shaking hands with a Calarian. The Calarian looked like a tall, thin being with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. The human spoke on the recording, his voice preserved across centuries. "We promise. Humanity remembers. We will always remember." Lisa turned off the hologram. The office felt very quiet. "That was 847 years ago," Ambassador Krell said. "Everyone involved is long dead. This debt has no meaning now." "The Calarians are dying," Lisa said, looking at Jake. "The message came from their last colonies. The Dreth Empire has risen again. They're attacking the Calarian worlds right now. The Calarians sent the message to us to Earth. They're asking if we remember." Jake sat down heavily in his chair. His mind raced through the implications. A military operation to help the Calarians would cost enormous resources. It would take ships away from defending human space. It might start a new war with the Dreth. The Galactic Council would never approve it. "How many Calarians are left?" he asked. "Maybe 3 million, Lisa said. "All on 3 colony worlds. The Dreth fleet will reach them in less than a month." "The Council will not support this," Krell said firmly. "I already know how they will vote. Most species think humans are too aggressive, too unpredictable. If you try to help the Calarians, the Council will condemn you. They may impose sanctions. They may expel humanity from the Council completely. Jake looked at the datapad showing the old promise. He thought about 300,000 human refugees who were saved by strangers who had no reason to help, except kindness. He thought about Calarian children who played with human children in those old images. He thought about billions of Calarians who died because they chose to be kind. Send the information to Earth, Jake said. Send everything. The old records, the promise, the current situation. Let the President and Congress see it all. Jake, Krell said, moving closer. Think carefully. Your career will end. You might start a war. The other species already fear humans. This will make it worse. Send it to Earth, Jake repeated. And prepare a response to the Calarians. What response? Lisa asked. Jake looked at the stars beyond his window, at the vast darkness where 3 million beings waited to see if anyone remembered them. Tell them we received their message, Jake said. Tell them we remember. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. She nodded and left quickly to begin the transmissions. Krell remained, studying Jake with his large dark eyes. Your species is strange, the vaccine said. You hold on to things long after they stop mattering. 800 years is nothing to you. You act like it happened yesterday. Because to us it might as well have, Jake said. Those refugees were real people. They had children, and those children had children. Some of their descendants are alive today. They grew up hearing stories about the kind aliens who saved their great-great-grandparents. The Calarians saved humanity's future. How could we forget that? But the cost, Krell said. What you're about to do will cost so much. I know, Jake said. But there are costs to forgetting, too. There are costs to being the kind of species that abandons people who saved us. That cost is too high. Krell was silent for a long moment. Then he made a gesture that Jake recognized as a vaccine expression of respect. I will be watching, Krell said. I think many species will be watching. What humans do next will be remembered one way or another. After Krell left, Jake stood alone in his office. He pulled up the old images again, looking at the Calarian cities that no longer existed. The faces of beings long dead who chose kindness over safety. He thought about the message sent across the void, a plea from the dying to those they once saved. The word echoed in his mind. Remember. Jake touched the communication panel on his desk and opened a channel to Earth. It would take hours for his message to arrive, but he needed to send it now. He needed Earth to understand what was at stake. This is Commander Jake Morrison at Nova Geneva Station, he began. I'm sending you classified historical data about the First Contact War. There's something our people promised 800 years ago. There's something we need to decide right now. The question is simple. Are we the kind of species that keeps its promises even when it's hard? Even when it costs everything? I think I know the answer. I hope I'm right. He ended the transmission and sat back in his chair. Beyond his window, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, 3 million Calarians waited. They waited to see if humans remembered. They waited to learn if kindness, shown so long ago, still mattered. Jake closed his eyes and thought about children playing in alien parks, about families welcomed into strange new homes, about a promise made when humanity had nothing left to give except gratitude and a vow to remember. The universe was about to learn something about humans. It was about to learn that when humans make a promise, when they give their word, time means nothing. Distance means nothing. Cost means nothing. Jake opened his eyes and began to plan. He knew what was coming. Earth would respond. Humanity would mobilize, and the galaxy would tremble at what happened when humans recalled a debt. The message had been sent. The word had been spoken. Remember. Now the universe would see what that word meant to humanity. President Amy Walsh sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House. Around her, military advisors and government officials studied the data that Jake Morrison had sent from Nova Geneva Station. The room was silent except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional rustle of paper. Everyone was reading the same historical files, seeing the same images of Calarian cities and human refugees from 8 centuries ago. Admiral Ben Cole, commander of Earth's defensive fleet, was the first to speak. He was an older man with gray hair and a face marked by years of military service. His voice was heavy with concern. Madam President, the strategic situation is clear. The Dreth Empire controls 40 star systems now. Their fleet outnumbers ours significantly. If we engage them to protect the Calarians, we could lose half our military capacity. Our own colonies would be vulnerable. I've seen the numbers, Amy said quietly. She had been reading reports all night. Her eyes hurt and her head ached, but she kept reading because this decision was too important to make quickly. Dr. Kyle Martinez, Earth's chief historian, had been flown in from Mars University specifically for this meeting. He was young for such an important position, barely 40 years old, but he knew more about Earth's early contact history than anyone alive. The promise was real, Kyle said, placing his tablet on the table. I verified every document. The Calarian elder Mirath saved 300,000 humans. Earth's government at the time made a formal promise. It was recorded, witnessed, and sealed. By every legal and moral standard, this debt exists. But 847 years have passed, another official said. The beings who made that promise are dead. The beings who received it are dead. Can we really be held to something that old? Before anyone could answer, the door opened and a young Calarian entered. Her name was Mira, and she had arrived on Earth 2 days ago aboard a refugee ship that barely made it through Dreth space. She was thin, her shimmering skin dull from stress and poor nutrition, but her eyes were bright with desperate hope. May I speak? Mira asked in careful English. She had learned the language from old recordings, from stories passed down through generations of Calarians who remembered the humans they once saved. Amy nodded. Please. Mira walked to the center of the room. She seemed very small among all the human officials and military leaders. My grandmother's grandmother knew humans, Mira said softly. She was a child when your people came to our worlds. She played with human children. She learned your languages. She told stories about how scared the humans were, how far from home, how they cried at night for families they had lost. She told stories about how Calarians and humans became friends. Mira paused, her forearms trembling slightly. When the Dreth came to punish us, when they destroyed our worlds, humans sent messages. They said they were sorry. They said they wished they could help. But your people were still rebuilding. You had no strength to fight for us. We understood. We never blamed you. The room remained silent. Everyone watched this young alien who spoke with such quiet dignity. My people remembered humans kindly, Mira continued. We told stories about you, about how you kept fighting even when you were losing, about your courage, about your loyalty to each other. We admired you. When we sent the message to remember, we didn't know if you would answer. We hoped. We remembered how humans made promises and kept them. We hoped you were still that species. Amy felt something break inside her chest. She looked around the room at her advisors, at the military officers, at the bureaucrats who dealt in numbers and strategies. They all looked uncomfortable, moved by words spoken by a dying species reaching out across the void. Thank you, Mira, Amy said gently. Please wait outside. We need to discuss this further. After Mira left, the room erupted in debate. Voices rose and fell. Arguments crashed against each other like waves. Some said helping the Calarians was strategic suicide. Others said it was a moral imperative. Numbers were thrown around. Casualty estimates, economic projections, political consequences. Admiral Cole raised his hand for silence. When the room quieted, he spoke. I've been in the military for 35 years, he said. I fought in 3 wars. I know what combat costs. I know what we'll lose if we do this. He paused and his voice grew softer. But I also know what we'll lose if we don't. My great-great-great-grandfather was one of those refugees. He was 5 years old when the Calarians took him in. He lived to be 98. He had 6 children, 23 grandchildren, and more descendants than I can count. I exist because the Calarians chose kindness. How can I vote to abandon them? The Admiral's words settled over the room like snow, quiet, heavy, undeniable. Amy stood up. She had made her decision. I'm calling an emergency session of Congress, she said. The people need to know about this. They need to see these records. They need to decide what kind of species we want to be. Within hours, the information was released to the public. News networks across Earth and all the colonies broadcast the historical files. People saw images of human refugees being welcomed by aliens who owed them nothing. They saw recordings of the promise made centuries ago. They learned about the Calarians who died defending human lives. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Public demonstrations erupted in every major city. Not protests against helping the Calarians, but demands that Earth honor its debt. People flooded the streets carrying signs that said, Remember them, and they saved us, we saved them. A documentary filmmaker named Carmen Torres released a short film that went viral across human space. It showed the faces of humans whose ancestors had been saved by Calarians. It showed old recordings of Calarian children and human children playing together. It ended with a simple question displayed in white text on a black screen. They remembered their promise to help us. Will we remember ours? Within 3 days, the documentary had been viewed by 4 billion humans. Support for helping the Calarians reached 92% in global polls. Colony worlds began volunteering their defense fleets. Private companies offered ships and supplies. Military recruitment stations were overwhelmed with volunteers. The Galactic Council watched all of this with growing alarm. An emergency session was called. Ambassadors from 43 species gathered to discuss what humans were planning. Ambassador Krell represented the vaccine as always. He stood before the council and delivered his report. Humans are mobilizing their entire military, he said. They're pulling ships from defensive positions. They're leaving their colonies vulnerable. They're spending resources that will set back their expansion plans for decades. All of this for 3 million Calarians they have never met, because of a debt 847 years old. The council chamber erupted in confused chatter. Several species demanded explanations. The Vreem ambassador, an insectoid being with a logical mind, spoke up. This makes no sense strategically, the Vreem said. The individuals who made the promise are dead. The individuals who saved human lives are dead. The debt has no legal standing after so much time. Why do humans persist in this irrational behavior? Krell thought about his conversations with Jake Morrison, about the look in the human's eyes when he spoke about promises and memory. Because they're human, Krell said simply. Time doesn't erase their debts. Death doesn't end their obligations. They remember. And they believe that remembering, that honoring promises no matter how old, is what makes them who they are. The council voted 40-3 to condemn humanity's planned action. They threatened economic sanctions. They threatened to expel humanity from the council entirely. They sent an official message to Earth demanding that humans stand down. President Walsh read the message in front of Congress as Earth's representatives gathered to make their final decision. When she finished reading the council's threats, she set the paper down and looked at the assembled leaders of humanity. The Galactic Council says we're being irrational, Amy said. They say this debt is too old to matter. They say we should be practical, strategic, logical. They threaten us with isolation and economic hardship if we proceed. She paused, letting the weight of those threats sink in. 847 years ago, the Calarians could have been practical too. They could have been strategic. They could have refused to help 300,000 human refugees because helping us would bring Dreth vengeance upon them. They could have thought about their own safety first. But they didn't. They chose kindness. They chose to help strangers who had nothing to offer them. And they paid a terrible price for that choice. Amy's voice grew stronger, filling the chamber. Now they're dying and they sent us a message. One word. Remember. They're asking if we're still the species they saved. They're asking if promises still mean something to us. They're asking if we remember kindness when we see it. She looked around at every face in the room. I know my answer. I think I know yours too. The question before us is simple. Are we human? Do we remember? Do we keep our promises even when it's hard? Even when it costs everything, even when the rest of the galaxy thinks we're fools? The vote was unanimous. Every representative voted yes. The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for 5 minutes. People in the gallery cried and cheered. That night, President Walsh addressed not just Earth, but every human. Captain Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of the Remembrance and watched the fleet assemble around his ship. The battleship was old, built 40 years ago during a time when humanity thought another war might come. Now that war had arrived, though not in the way anyone expected. Ryan was 53 years old, a career officer who had seen combat twice before. He thought he understood war. Looking at the fleet gathering in Earth's orbit, he realized this was something different. The fleet consisted of 847 warships, one for every year since the promise was made. The number was deliberate, symbolic, a message to everyone watching. Around those warships gathered 300 civilian transport ships, medical vessels, and cargo haulers. Every ship had volunteered. Many were privately owned, their captains willing to risk everything for people they had never met. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez worked at the tactical station, coordinating fleet movements. She was young, only 26, and this was her first major operation. Her hands moved quickly across the controls, but Ryan could see the tension in her shoulders. "Status report," Ryan said calmly. He had learned long ago that the captain's voice set the mood for the entire bridge. "Stay calm," and the crew stayed calm. "All ships reporting ready, sir," Emma said. "Colony fleets from Mars, Europa, Titan, and New Shanghai have arrived. The last stragglers are jumping in now." She paused, checking her data. "Sir, some of the colony ships are defense platforms. They pulled them from their home systems. Those colonies are completely undefended now." Ryan felt a chill run through him. Every colony in human space was making itself vulnerable. If another hostile force decided to attack while the fleet was away, those worlds would fall easily. The colonies knew this. They sent their defenses anyway. "They understand what we're doing," Ryan said quietly. "They know what's at stake." Chief Engineer Dan Park appeared on the communication screen from the engine room. Dan was older than Ryan, pushing 60, and he had kept the remembrance running long past the ship's expected service life. "Captain, I need to tell you something," Dan said, his weathered face serious. "This old girl isn't built for extended high-speed travel anymore. We push her too hard and systems are going to fail. I can keep her together for the fight, but I can't guarantee how long after that." "How long do we need?" Ryan asked. "However long it takes to get those people out," Dan replied. "After that, all bets are off." Ryan nodded. Dan understood the mission. They all did. Get to Calarian space, fight off the Dreth, evacuate 3 million beings. What happened to the fleet after that was secondary. The communication system chimed, and Admiral Ben Cole's face appeared on the main screen. The Admiral was on the flagship at the center of the formation. "All ships, this is Admiral Cole," he said, his voice carrying to every bridge in the fleet. "In 10 minutes, we jump to hyperspace. Our journey will take 18 days. When we arrive at Calarian Prime, we'll be facing a Dreth fleet that outnumbers us 3-1. They have superior weapons and shielding. By every strategic calculation, we should lose this fight." Ryan watched his crew react to those words. Some faces went pale. Others set their jaws and gripped their stations harder. "But we're not going to lose," Cole continued. "We're not going to lose because we're fighting for something the Dreth don't understand. We're fighting to keep a promise. We're fighting to repay a debt that's 847 years old. We're fighting to prove that humanity remembers." The Admiral paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with pride. 8 centuries ago, strangers showed us kindness when we needed it most. They paid a terrible price for that kindness. Today we show them that their sacrifice mattered. Today we prove that humanity never forgets. All ships prepare for jump. The fleet began to move. 847 warships and 300 support vessels, all jumping to hyperspace together. It was the largest human military operation in history. Ryan felt the remembrance shudder as the jump engines engaged. "Jump in 5, Emma called out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Space twisted around them, and the stars disappeared into the strange blue void of hyperspace. The fleet was committed now. There was no turning back. During the 18-day journey, Ryan spent his time preparing his crew and watching the galactic news feeds. The reaction from other species was exactly what humans had expected. Most were shocked. Many were angry. Some were frightened. The Galactic Council officially condemned the fleet's departure. They imposed immediate economic sanctions on all human colonies. Several species severed diplomatic relations entirely. Ambassador Krell sent a private message to Admiral Cole that was leaked to human news networks. "You have made yourselves outcasts," Krell wrote. "The galaxy sees you as dangerous, unpredictable, and irrational. I thought I should tell you this. I also thought I should tell you that I wish my people had your courage." That last line spread across human space like fire. People shared it, discussed it, debated what it meant. Some saw it as an insult. Others saw it as the highest compliment. On the 10th day of the journey, the Dreth Empire sent an official communication to the human fleet. Ryan watched it with his senior officers in the briefing room. A Dreth commander appeared on screen. The Dreth were large, powerful beings with thick armor plates and multiple eyes. This one wore the insignia of a high-ranking military leader. "Human fleet," the Dreth said in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "You traveled to Calarian space without authorization. The Calarians are under Dreth jurisdiction. They are being pacified for past crimes against the Dreth Empire. You have no legal right to interfere. Turn back now or face complete annihilation. We have destroyed the Calarians once before. We will destroy them again. If you stand in our way, we will destroy you as well. The message ended. The briefing room was silent for a moment. Past crimes, Emma said bitterly. They mean the crime of helping us. What do we tell them, sir? Dan asked. Ryan thought about it for a moment, then smiled grimly. Admiral Cole will send the official response. But if it were up to me, I'd say, come and stop us. The fleet continued its journey. On day 15, they received a message from the Calarians. Mira had sent it from Earth, but it contained recordings from Calarian Prime. Ryan gathered his crew to watch. The recordings showed Calarian cities under bombardment. Buildings crumbled. Fires burned. People ran through streets carrying children and precious belongings. But despite the destruction, there was also hope. Calarians looked up at the sky and talked about the human fleet, coming to save them. One recording showed a Calarian elder speaking to a crowd in a shelter deep underground. The humans remember, the elder said, his voice shaking with emotion. After 847 years, they remember. Help is coming. We must hold on. We must survive until they arrive. The crowd cheered, their forearms raised in celebration despite the bombs falling above them. They believed. They had faith that humans would keep their promise. Ryan felt the weight of that faith pressing down on him. 3 million beings waiting for rescue, believing that help was coming. The fleet could not fail. Failure meant extinction for the Calarians. Failure meant that humanity's word meant nothing. On day 17, the fleet crossed into Calarian space. They were close now, so close that Ryan could feel the tension building throughout the ship. Crew members worked double shifts, checking weapons, preparing medical bays, running combat drills over and over. Emma came to Ryan's quarters late that night. She looked exhausted but determined. "Sir, I need to ask you something," she said. "Do you think we can win?" Ryan considered lying, giving her a confident answer to boost morale. But Emma deserved honesty. "I don't know," he said. "The numbers are against us. The Dreth have better weapons. They have more ships. By every strategic analysis, we should lose." "Then why are we doing this?" Emma asked, not challenging him, just genuinely trying to understand. "Because some things matter more than winning," Ryan said. "Some things matter more than survival. Keeping promises matters. Remembering kindness matters. Being the kind of species that stands by its word. Even when it's hard, even when it costs everything, that matters." He looked at Emma, at her young face and old eyes. "The Calarians could have let our ancestors die," Ryan continued. "Nobody would have blamed them. It would have been the smart choice, the safe choice. But they chose kindness instead. Now we choose honor. We choose to be worthy of what they did for us. Whatever happens in the battle, that choice matters." Emma nodded slowly. "My grandmother's grandmother was a refugee," she said quietly. "She was saved by the Calarians. She lived to be 102. She had dozens of descendants. I exist because strangers were kind to someone I never met. How could I not fight for this?" She left and Ryan was alone with his thoughts. He pulled up tactical displays, studying the Calarian system, planning approach vectors and combat strategies. But his mind kept returning to the image of that Calarian elder speaking to the crowd in the shelter. "The humans remember," the elder had said. Yes, Ryan thought. We remember, and tomorrow, the universe will see what that means. On day 18, the fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Calarian system. Alarms immediately blared across every ship. The tactical displays lit up with hostile contacts. The first volley of Dreth weapons fire tore through space like lightning. Ryan gripped the armrests of his command chair as the remembrance shook from near misses. The shields held, but warning lights flickered across multiple consoles. The battle had barely started, and already his ship was taking damage. "Return fire," Ryan ordered calmly. "All batteries concentrate on the nearest heavy cruiser. Emma, coordinate with the fleet. We need to punch a hole through their line." The Remembrance's main cannons fired, joined by dozens of other human ships. The concentrated fire overwhelmed the shields of a Dreth cruiser, and the enemy ship exploded in a ball of flame. But 2 more ships moved to take its place. The Dreth had so many vessels that losing one barely mattered. Admiral Cole's voice came through the chaos. "All ships, Delta formation. Focus fire on grid sections 7 and 12. We break through there or not at all." The human fleet reorganized mid-battle, ships moving with practiced precision despite the incoming fire. Ryan had to admire the discipline. These crews had trained for years, but training and actual combat were very different things. His people were performing beautifully under impossible conditions. Emma's console exploded in sparks. She threw herself backward, her uniform smoking. Dan appeared on the bridge seconds later with a repair crew, pulling Emma away from her station and getting a replacement officer in position. "I'm fine," Emma gasped, coughing from the smoke. "Just burned my hands. Get me to medical and get me back here." "That's the spirit," Dan said, helping her off the bridge. "We need every hand we can get." The battle intensified. Human ships pushed forward, taking terrible damage but refusing to stop. The Dreth fought back with superior weapons and numbers, but they hadn't expected the sheer determination of the human assault. Human ships that lost engines kept firing their weapons. Ships with failing shields rammed into Dreth vessels. When one human destroyer had its bridge destroyed, the engineering crew took control and continued fighting. "They're not retreating," a Dreth commander said on an intercepted communication channel. "Their ships are falling apart and they keep coming. What is wrong with these humans?" Ryan heard that and smiled grimly. What was wrong with humans was that they kept their promises. They remembered their debts, and they didn't stop no matter the cost. The remembrance took a direct hit to the port side. Explosions ripped through 3 decks. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Dan's voice came through the intercom from engineering, shouting over the noise of failing systems. "Captain, we've lost the main reactor stabilizer. I can keep us going, but we're on borrowed time. Maybe 2 hours before the whole system fails." "Give me whatever you can, Dan," Ryan said. "We're not done yet." On the main display, Ryan watched the tactical situation evolve. The human fleet was taking horrendous casualties. 20 ships destroyed, 40 more badly damaged. But they were making progress. The Dreth line was beginning to buckle under the concentrated assault. If they could just push a little harder, break through completely, the civilian transports could reach the planet. Admiral Cole's flagship, the Unity, pushed to the front of the formation. The massive battleship absorbed incredible damage, its shields flashing constantly under Dreth fire. But Cole kept pushing, kept fighting, leading from the front like the old warrior he was. "All ships," Cole broadcast, "one more push. Everything we have. Break their line now." The entire human fleet surged forward. Ships that could barely fly threw themselves at the Dreth blockade. The sacrifice was enormous, but it worked. The Dreth line cracked, then shattered. A gap opened in their formation. "Civilian ships, go now," Cole ordered. "Get those people out." 300 transport ships raced through the gap, protected by the remaining warships. Ryan watched them streak toward Calarian Prime, and he felt hope surge in his chest. They were going to do it. They were actually going to save the Calarians. But the Dreth weren't finished. Their commander, High Commander Drethkar, had been holding back his elite forces. Now he committed them to battle. 50 heavy battleships, the pride of the Dreth fleet, moved to close the gap and cut off the transports. Admiral Cole saw the threat immediately. "Those battleships cannot reach the transports. All remaining combat ships intercept. Protect the civilians at all costs." Ryan knew what that meant. The warships were already damaged, already running on failing systems. Intercepting those fresh Dreth battleships was a suicide mission. But it had to be done. The transports were unarmed and helpless. If the Dreth reached them, 300 ships full of civilians would die and the Calarians would never be rescued. "You heard the Admiral," Ryan said to his crew. "Set intercept course for those battleships. All power to weapons and engines. Forget the shields, we won't need them where we're going." His crew didn't hesitate. They knew what he was asking. They knew this might be their last battle. But they set the course anyway, hands steady on the controls. The Remembrance led a formation of 30 damaged human warships directly toward the Dreth elite force. It was like watching insects attack a giant. The Dreth battleships were so much larger, so much more powerful. But the human ships didn't slow down. The Dreth commander, Drethkar, watched the human approach with confusion turning to alarm. He sent a communication to the human fleet, his voice filled with genuine bewilderment. "Why do you persist? You cannot win. Your ships are falling apart. Half your fleet is destroyed. Retreat now and you might survive. Why throw away your lives for aliens you don't even know?" Admiral Cole answered, his voice tired but unshakable. "Because 847 years ago, those aliens saved our ancestors when no one else would. Because we promised to remember them. Because humanity keeps its word. You wouldn't understand. Your kind only knows conquest. We know honor. Honor is worthless if you're dead," Drethkar replied. "No," Cole said quietly. "Honor is all that matters. Especially when facing death, the human ships opened fire. The Dreth elite force fired back, and space became a hell of explosions and dying ships. The Remembrance took hit after hit. Systems failed across the ship. Fire spread through multiple decks. The artificial gravity failed, leaving the crew floating and struggling to work their stations. But Ryan kept the ship moving forward, kept the weapons firing. Around him, other human ships did the same. They were dying, but they were buying time. Every second they held the Dreth elite force here was another second for the transports to reach the planet and begin evacuations. On Calarian Prime, Captain Nicole Hayes flew her transport ship through a storm of falling bombs to reach the main refugee shelter. Nicole was 42, a commercial pilot who had volunteered her ship for the rescue mission. She had never been in combat before. She was terrified, but she kept flying. "This is Transport Ship Mercy," Nicole broadcast on all frequencies. "We're landing at shelter coordinates Alpha 7. All refugees head for evacuation points. We're getting you out!" The transport touched down in a bombed-out plaza. The rear cargo bay opened, and Calarians began running toward the ship. Families clutching children, elders being helped by the young, people carrying what little they could save from their burning world. Nicole watched them come aboard through her cockpit camera, and tears ran down her face. These were real people, terrified and desperate, running for their lives. And they were running toward human ships, trusting that strangers from across the galaxy would save them. "Come on," Nicole whispered. "Come on, we've got room. We've got room for all of you." The Mercy filled quickly. When it reached capacity, Nicole lifted off and another transport took her place. Across the planet, 300 ships were doing the same thing, loading refugees as fast as they could while bombs fell and buildings burned around them. In space, the battle continued. The Remembrance was dying. Main power was gone. Backup systems were failing. Fire spread through the ship despite the crew's desperate efforts to contain it. But Ryan kept the ship fighting, kept the weapons firing at the Dreth battleships. Dan appeared on the bridge, his uniform burned and torn, his face covered in soot. "Captain, the reactor is going critical. We have maybe 5 minutes before it explodes." Ryan looked at his tactical display. The transports were still loading refugees. They needed more time. Just a little more time. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about his daughter who was starting university next year. He thought about all the things he would miss. Then he thought about 300,000 human refugees saved by kind strangers 800 years ago. He thought about promises kept across centuries. "Dan, can you steer us?" Ryan asked. Dan understood immediately. His eyes widened, then he nodded. "Yes, sir. I can do that." "Good," Ryan said. He activated the ship-wide intercom one last time. "All hands, this is the captain. Abandon ship. I repeat, abandon ship. Get to the escape pods now. You have 3 minutes." The crew rushed to escape. Emma, back from medical with bandaged hands, refused to leave the bridge until Ryan ordered her to go. Dan stayed at his engineering station, his hands on the controls that would guide the ship's final course. "Dan, you need to go too," Ryan said. "Someone has to steer." Dan replied calmly. "You go, Captain. Let me do this." Ryan wanted to argue, but there was no time. He gripped Dan's shoulder. The Galactic Council chamber was more crowded than it had been in decades. Representatives from all 43 member species had gathered for an emergency session. The topic was simple and explosive: what to do about humanity. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the chamber representing Earth. He looked tired. The past 3 weeks since the Battle of Calarian Prime had been exhausting, filled with accusations, threats, and endless debates. But he stood straight, his expression calm and dignified. Around him, alien ambassadors argued among themselves. Some demanded that humanity be expelled from the Council immediately. Others called for economic sanctions so severe they would cripple human civilization. A few voices spoke in support of humanity, but they were drowned out by the angry majority. The Council speaker, a tall being from the ancient Threxian species, called for order. When the chamber quieted, he turned to Jake. "Commander Morrison," the speaker said, his voice formal and cold, "humanity has defied this Council's direct orders. You launched a military operation without authorization. You engaged in combat with the Dreth Empire, destabilizing an entire region of space. You ignored our warnings and our threats. Worst of all, you did all this for a debt that has no legal standing after 800 years. What do you have to say for yourself?" Jake looked around at the assembled aliens, at faces showing anger, fear, and confusion. He thought about choosing his words carefully, being diplomatic. Then he decided that diplomacy had failed. "It was time for truth, I'm not sorry," Jake said clearly. His voice carried through the chamber's audio system. "Humanity is not sorry. We did what we promised to do 8 centuries ago. We saved the Calarians because they saved us. If you think that makes us dangerous or unpredictable, then you don't understand what honor means." The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Several ambassadors rose from their seats demanding Jake be removed, but the speaker raised his hand for silence. "You speak of honor," the speaker said, "but honor is a luxury that civilizations cannot afford. Practical concerns must come first. Resources, safety, strategic advantage. These things matter more than ancient promises to dead beings." Before Jake could respond, Ambassador Krell rose from his seat. The vaccine diplomat moved slowly to the chamber floor, his scales showing colors that Jake had never seen before. It took him a moment to realize that Krell was ashamed. "I must speak," Krell said. "I must tell you all something that my people have hidden for 200 years. The chamber fell silent. Krell was one of the council's most respected members. For him to interrupt like this was unprecedented. 217 years ago, Krell began, his voice heavy with emotion. The vaccine empire had an ally, the Kelvin people. We had treaties with them, promises of mutual defense. When they were attacked by raiders, they called for our help. Our council debated for weeks. The cost of helping them was high. The strategic value was low. We decided it was not practical to honor our treaties." Krell paused, and his voice broke slightly. "The Kelvin people were destroyed. Their entire species was wiped out. They died calling our names, believing we would come. We never did. And for 200 years, this shame has lived in vaccine hearts. We forgot what honor means. We forgot that some promises are more important than practical concerns." He turned to Jake, and his large eyes were filled with tears. "Humans remembered," Krell said. "When everyone told them to forget, when everyone told them to be practical, they remembered. They honored an 800-year-old debt. They saved a species that most of the galaxy had forgotten existed. And I watched them do it, and I was ashamed. Ashamed of my people. Ashamed of this council. Ashamed that we have become the kind of beings who think honor is a luxury we cannot afford." Krell sat down heavily. The chamber remained silent. Several ambassadors looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Then another ambassador stood. She was from the Vreem species, the logical insectoids who had questioned human irrationality. "I must also speak," the Vreem said. Her voice was different now, less clinical, more emotional. 340 years ago, the Vreem people made a promise to protect a small species called the Tilken. We had the ability to help them. We chose not to because it was not cost-effective. The Tilken still exist barely on one dying colony. They send us messages sometimes asking if we remember our promise. We ignore these messages. We tell ourselves they are illogical, that the cost is too high. She looked at Jake, and her compound eyes showed something that might have been respect. "Humans showed us what we should have done," the Vreem said, "what we should still do. They showed us that keeping promises, honoring debts, these things matter more than cost-benefit analysis. Perhaps logic without honor is not logic at all. Perhaps it is just cowardice wearing logic's mask." One by one, other ambassadors began to stand and speak. 7 species in total admitted to forgotten promises, abandoned allies, debts never repaid. The chamber's mood shifted from anger to something else, something more introspective and uncomfortable. The speaker watched all of this with an expression that Jake could not read. Finally, when the last confession had been made, the speaker addressed the chamber. "It seems," he said slowly, "that humanity has taught us something, or perhaps reminded us of something we once knew. The question before us now is not whether to punish humans for their actions. The question is whether we want to be a council that punishes honor and rewards forgetting." The vote, when it came, was not what anyone expected. Instead of expelling humanity, the council voted to commend them. The economic sanctions were lifted. 7 species formally apologized for their condemnation of the rescue mission, but the real changes happened in the days and weeks that followed. The vaccine empire sent a fleet to the last Kelvin colony and offered the survivors a new home on a vaccine world. The Vreem contacted the Tilken and began negotiations to fulfill their 300-year-old promise. Other species began reviewing their own forgotten obligations, their own abandoned allies. A movement spread across the galaxy, started by young beings from multiple species. They called themselves the Rememberers. They wore symbols showing a human hand clasping an alien hand. Their message was simple. Some debts must be paid, some promises must be kept no matter how old, no matter the cost. On Earth, President Amy Walsh stood before a memorial that had been built in the 3 weeks since the battle. It listed the names of all 47,000 humans who had died saving the Calarians. The memorial was made of polished black stone, and the names were carved in letters that would last for centuries. Mira stood beside the president. The young Calarian had become an unofficial spokesperson for her people, the voice of those who had been saved. "Your people gave us back our future," Mira said softly. "How do we thank you for that? How do we repay such a debt?" Amy smiled and shook her head. "You don't repay it. Your ancestors saved our people when they had nothing to gain and everything to lose. We saved you because it was right, because we promised, because we remember. The debt is balanced now. You owe us nothing." "But we want to give something," Mira insisted. She pulled out a data crystal and handed it to Amy. "This contains our people's most precious knowledge. Scientific data, medical information, cultural records, things that could help humanity advance by decades. We want you to have it." Amy looked at the crystal, then at Mira. She thought about refusing, about saying that no payment was needed, but she saw the desperate need in Mira's eyes, the need to give something back, to not feel helpless and indebted forever. "Thank you," Amy said, accepting the crystal. "This is a generous gift. But you should know we didn't save you expecting anything in return. We saved you because 800 years ago, your people saved ours. That was enough reason." Later that day, scientists examining the data crystal discovered something remarkable. Among the information was the solution to a problem that had plagued humanity for decades. The Calarians had found a way to generate nearly limitless clean energy. The discovery would transform human civilization, solving resource shortages and opening up new possibilities for expansion. When Amy heard the news, she smiled. The Calarians had given them something precious, not as payment, but as a gift between friends. That felt right somehow. That felt like the beginning of something good. In the weeks that followed, the Calarians settled on several human colony worlds. They were welcomed with celebrations and genuine warmth. Human children played with Calarian children, just as their ancestors had done 8 centuries ago. New friendships formed. New bonds were created. Jake Morrison visited one of these colonies, a beautiful world called New Hope that had offered to share its territory with the refugees. He walked through a park where humans and Calarians gathered together, and he felt something deep and satisfying in his chest. An elderly Calarian approached him. She was very old, one of the few who remembered the time before the Dreth attacks began. "I was there," she said to Jake, "when your people were refugees on our worlds. I was a child, but I remember. I remember playing with human children. I remember thinking how strange and wonderful they were, and I remember when you left, my teacher told me something. She said, 'Remember these humans. They are a species who keeps their promises. Someday, if we ever need them, they will remember us too.' I didn't,